In 2011, a worldwide phenomenon was born, HBO's Game of Thrones, adapted from George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire. It was an impressive feat that no other show had done before, having everyone from your grandparents to teenagers talking about it almost non-stop for 7 years. Then came Season 8, undoing all that had come before and slapping fans in the face. One of the biggest downfalls ever seen in TV.
And who has a better story than Bran the Broken?
You can't keep getting away with it!
While at the height of its popularity, HBO was preparing to cash in on some spin-offs with about half a dozen in various stages of development. Cue House of the Dragon, the first to see the light of day. I must admit, I was hesitant at first, still healing from Season 8, and to be quite frank, I didn't even know it premiered last week. It was pretty good, so let's check it out. Spoilers for the whole episode, but don't worry, the show will not be ruined by knowing what happens in the pilot. With King Jaehaerys growing old and no sons to the heir, a council was called and many came to claim succession, but in the end it was Viserys who became the next king. The show starts 9 years into Viserys' reign. The episode centers around the next possible heir to the throne, as Viserys awaits the birth, hopefully, of a son. He organizes an heirs tournament during the final week of Queen Aemma's pregnancy, with all the houses coming to participate. But during the delivery, complications arise and the queen loses her life, giving birth to a boy who dies in the same day. The only rightful heirs to the throne left are Daemon, the king's impulsive brother, Rhaenyra, one of the original choices of the old king that was dismissed because she was a woman, and Viserys' daughter, Rhaenyra. He chooses his daughter after banishing his brother Daemon for mocking his dead child. I'll start with the characters because it gets confusing with the names very fast. Those pushed to the forefront are reigning king and queen Viserys and Aemma, Rhaenyra their daughter, Daemon the king's brother, Otto Hightower the hand of the king and his daughter Alicent. Finally, Rhaenyra dubbed the queen who never was and Lord Corlys her husband, head of House Valyrian. King Viserys is the stereotypical good king looking out for his own family and focused on his heir more than anything, in the end driving his wife to her deathbed and him to a breaking point. I do feel like Paddy Considine's performance varies from scene to scene, but ultimately ends up delivering on the scenes of grief and anger, the most important ones. The rest of the time, it's as if he's bored with the material, but I do think he'll be able to grow into the role. Aemma encapsulates the hardships that most women with those roles had to go through around that time, and I find it very satisfying compared to what we receive today, where every woman in a historical drama wants to fight the norms, be treated as a man. It ends up invalidating that these women went through their own problems, physically and mentally, having to constantly try and deliver a son while entertaining the role of queen.
The childbed is our battlefield.
We must learn to face it with a stiff lip.
We've only seen her pregnant and, with just a few scenes, understand who she is. I'd say Cyan Brooks easily gives one of the best performances of the show with little screen time. Their daughter Rhaenyra came off to me as very bratty in the beginning, but after the death of her mother, when tasked with taking the throne, you can tell she's not exactly ready, and I hope we see her progress as a character. Matt Smith was without a doubt a standout with an amazing performance. The role of Prince Daemon suited him like a charm. A ruthless, impulsive leader who wants the throne and will rule with an iron fist if he gets it. He doesn't like to be shown or thought of as weak, wanting the Targaryen name to spread fear. Hand of the King Otto Hightower and his daughter Alicent were my favorite characters for this episode, with most of the best performances coming from them and Matt Smith. Rhys Ifans and Emily Carey really sold their roles. Otto reminded me a lot of Varys and is the person I'm most interested in seeing in the future, while Alicent is sort of just a friend to Rhaenyra, but will probably play a larger role in the coming episodes. Rhaenyra was an interesting person. Seeing as she was dubbed the queen who never was, it gives her a lot of motive to try and take the throne, or at least with the help of Lord Corlys get close enough to take advantage of the new queen. Lord Corlys was a pretty weak character compared to the rest we got, mostly being silenced or not taken seriously by anyone other than his wife. You can tell that he is a cunning person, as he is always the only one to actually focus on external conflicts. I hope we get to see more of him as the head of House Valyrian and on the high seas. I do know this character was race swapped. For now, it doesn't bother me because there's no issues brought up about race, and I actually don't see the show going in that direction. Hopefully, because that means they race swap to talk about racism, and it would not make any sense whatsoever in this context. It does break the lore, and I think the only real reason we have for now was because they didn't want another bunch of white people on screen. I personally find that demeaning and racist, to be quite frank, being cast based on your skin color just to show diversity, but hopefully the story of the show isn't affected. Now that we've got all the characters out of the way, it's time to check out the plot. I'd actually argue that there aren't any actual issues with it. I will admit the show tries very hard to reel you in with the Game of Thrones references from the get-go, but about 15 minutes into the show, it finally fully becomes its own unique experience. The narrative is fairly simple to be able to lay the foundation for the character dynamics of what could possibly come in the season. For example, Kristen Cole and Daemon's rivalry, Lord Hightower's relationship with Rhaenyra now that she'll be the queen and what that does with Viserys, or how taking the throne will affect the new queen and Alicent's life. It's a huge setup of not only dynamics but individual motives as to who should really or who would try taking the throne. A great aspect of the show is how it treats it as the real world. Everything isn't black and white, there's always a grey area, and with every debate shown, it's never clearly a one-sided argument, with the outcome based on the characters and what we know of them, not just artificially made for the sake of plot. Holy shit, good writing!
Nice.
The only problems I have are during the tournament. First one is a nitpick. At this time, we don't know if the queen will give birth to a boy, so the first heir, if it wasn't a boy, would be Daemon, but fitting to his character, he participates. It's a tournament that can go to the death, and if he hadn't actually gotten a fair opponent, he would have easily died like the rest of them. But I do think it's excusable because, as I said, it's his cocky personality. The second point is an actual issue. When Daemon completely aims for the horse and not the head, chest, or shield, he should be eliminated on the spot, but that's about it. A sequence I'd really like to address is the birth, and man, it plays out like a scene from a horror movie from Emma's perspective, and both times I watched the episode, it had me tense. The score is pretty good. It takes the original Game of Thrones theme but manages to add its own spin on it. Not used very often, mostly at the beginning and the end, but the rest of the soundtrack is a delight to listen to, and I praise it also for not being used as a manipulation tool. It allows the writing and acting to speak for itself, something rarely seen nowadays. Cinematography and editing are top-notch, showing that HBO is taking into account what they learned after filming almost 10 years of medieval fantasy. You can tell that a lot of effort was put into crafting the world, from CGI that looks arguably better than Season 8, probably because the scenes are properly lit, to costumes that just don't look like generic medieval apparel, and some shots are absolutely gorgeous. Now, the only gripe I have is the editing during the fight between Daemon and Kristen Cole. That has so many quick cuts in a span of 1 minute, you think it's Liam Neeson trying to climb a fence. Did I personally enjoy the pilot? Very much indeed. I'd say give it a watch if you're a Game of Thrones fan. But fair warning, I still don't trust HBO and they can easily mess this up with episode 2. So tread carefully as I am and don't get too invested. In the end, House of Dragon had a promising start with lots of possibilities to expand and be an incredible show if handled with care, passion, and good writing. Thanks for watching everyone, and thanks again for sticking around till the end. Let me know what you thought of the show in the comments. I'll be seeing you guys next week where I'll be covering Amazon's The Rings of Power. Let's see how that goes.